My parents threw a huge party for my brother's engagement. When I opened my invitation, I realized it wasn't even addressed to me, just guessed. My hands shook, my heart sank, and I finally understood. In their eyes, I was never family, just a placeholder for their pride. It started with an envelope, cream colored, thick, and expensive looking, the kind of stationery you buy for something that's supposed to be remembered. It had my parents' return address embossed in gold at the top, the faintest shimmer catching under my apartment's dull kitchen light. I don't know why I hesitated to open it. Maybe because it felt too formal to be from them. Too distant. My parents never sent me letters, not even for birthdays. A text, maybe a call, and that was if they remembered. Support our channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Your clicks help us bring you even better videos. But that envelope sat on my counter like a ghost, waiting for me to face something I didn't know I'd been avoiding. When I finally tore it open, I expected the usual: an invitation to dinner, a holiday gathering, something with the unspoken condition of showing up and pretending we were still a family. But what I pulled out was heavier: a glossy invitation card printed with cursive gold letters that caught the light when I tilted it. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Adam and Sophie. Adam, my brother, of course. There was a photo printed faintly in the background, him and Sophie standing in front of a lake, both smiling, both perfect. The kind of smile that looked rehearsed but still somehow effortless. My chest tightened. Not because I wasn't happy for him. I was, in that detached way you're happy for someone you used to be close to. But because when I looked closer, I noticed something small, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The envelope wasn't addressed to me, it said, "To our dear guest." I blinked. Once, twice. I turned it over, looked inside again, like maybe there was another card meant for me. Maybe this was just a mistake. Maybe someone at the printing shop got it wrong. But there was nothing else. Just the elegant card and an RSVP line at the bottom, printed with perfect indifference. That was it. I wasn't Eli, their son. I was guest. For a long moment, I just stood there, the hum of my refrigerator filling the silence of the apartment. The city outside moved on without me. Cars passed, someone's dog barked in the distance, laughter echoed faintly from a nearby balcony. But inside my small kitchen, it felt like time stopped. My hands were shaking when I set the card down. It wasn't about the name. It was about what it meant. My family had always been a careful performance, the kind where everyone had a role, and mine had always been the one they didn't quite know how to define. Adam was the golden child, the son who followed the path, who stayed close, who built a life that mirrored everything they'd hoped for. And me, I don't know. I left. I made choices they didn't understand. Journalism instead of law, renting an apartment downtown instead of buying a house near theirs, solitude instead of Sunday dinners filled with forced smiles. I told myself I was fine with the distance, that I liked my quiet, that I didn't need them. But seeing that envelope, realizing that even on paper I wasn't part of the story, it hit somewhere deeper than I wanted to admit. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over Adam's contact. For a moment, I imagined calling him, asking if he'd seen the invitations before they went out. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe it was a clerical thing. But something inside me already knew the answer. Adam always knew everything. I didn't call. Instead, I stared at the card one last time, then placed it face down on the counter. The next morning, I almost threw it away. But something stopped me. Not anger, not even curiosity, just this dull sense of duty. Maybe I needed to see it through. Maybe I needed closure, whatever that meant. So I marked the date on my calendar. I even circled it in red. The night of the engagement party, the sky hung low with clouds, the kind that look heavy but never actually rain. I drove out to the suburbs where my parents lived, where I used to live. And every mile felt like retracing a version of myself I'd left behind. The streets were wider out there, lined with trimmed hedges and porch lights that glowed soft yellow. Perfect, quiet, rehearsed, like a movie scene you've already seen too many times. When I turned onto my parents' street, I almost didn't recognize the house. There were cars lined up along both sides of the road, Music drifting faintly through the air, soft jazz, something expensive sounding. Lights glowed from every window, warm and inviting, like a postcard. For a second, I sat in the car with the engine still running, staring at that house and feeling like an intruder, like I was about to walk into someone else's memory. Then I killed the engine, stepped out, and pocketed the keys. As I walked up the driveway, I could hear laughter spilling from the backyard, that familiar blend of small talk and clinking glasses. The smell of catered food, wine, and cut flowers hung in the air. My mom spotted me before I reached the door. She was standing near the entrance, wearing a pale blue dress, her hair done in the same neat twist she always wore for important occasions. When her eyes met mine, there was a flicker. Surprise, maybe, before she forced a smile. "Eli," she said, her tone perfectly polite. "You came." I did. I watched her closely, waiting for something more. Maybe warmth, maybe apology. But she just nodded like I'd met an expectation she wasn't sure I would. "Well," she said lightly, "come in. Everyone's in the back." Everyone, not family. Inside, the house looked even larger than I remembered. The furniture gleamed, every corner polished and perfect. There were framed photos lining the hallway, vacations, birthdays, graduations. And as I walked past them, I noticed something strange. Most of them were new. Photos of Adam and Sophie, Adam at his new job, Adam with my parents, Adam and Sophie with my parents. There wasn't a single new photo of me. The last one that had me in it was from years ago, a faded shot from my college graduation, half hidden behind a newer frame. I swallowed hard, forcing my face into something neutral before stepping out into the backyard. The noise hit me all at once. The hum of conversations, laughter, the faint rhythm of a live band playing near the patio. There must have been 50 people there, or relatives, friends, colleagues. Tables covered with white linens, fairy lights strung across the yard, champagne flutes glinting under the light. It was beautiful in a way that felt deliberate. And in the center of it all stood Adam and Sophie. He looked good, confident, polished, the same effortless charm he'd always had. Sophie was radiant, all soft curls and careful smiles, her hand resting lightly on his arm like they were posing for a magazine cover. When Adam saw me, his expression flickered. Brief hesitation before he smiled. Broad and warm, the kind that photographs well. "Eli, you made it." I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Wouldn't miss it." He laughed, clapped my shoulder, and for a moment, the familiarity of it almost felt real. But there was something in his eyes. That slight guardedness, that unspoken tension that always lived between us. Sophie leaned in. "It's so nice you could come, Eli. I wasn't sure if you'd—" She stopped herself. "If I'd what?" I asked gently, though I already knew. "If you'd be in town," she finished, her smile polite but thin. I let it go. This wasn't the night to fight old ghosts. As the evening wore on, I drifted from one polite conversation to another. Distant relatives I barely remembered. Family friends who said things like, "So proud of Adam." And, "You must be thrilled for your brother." I smiled, nodded, played along, the same way I always had. But underneath it all, I felt invisible. No one asked what I'd been doing. No one mentioned my work. Not one person seemed to notice that my name wasn't even on the invitation. It was like I was a placeholder in my own family story, the empty space between other people's happiness. At some point, I found myself by the drink table staring into a glass of champagne that had already gone flat. The night air was cool, the music soft. Across the yard, my parents stood with Adam and Sophie, laughing with a group of guests. My mother's hand rested proudly on Sophie's shoulder, my father's arm around Adam, and I just stood there, watching, realizing, maybe for the first time, that I didn't belong in that picture anymore. Maybe I never did. Still, I stayed. I don't even know why. Maybe habit. Maybe hope. Hours later, when most guests were inside dancing or mingling, I stepped away, wandered into the house to catch my breath. The air inside felt different now, quieter. That's when I noticed it, a small stack of leftover invitations sitting on the sideboard near the dining room. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I picked one up, and there it was again. Guest. Every single one said guest. No names, no individuality, just placeholders. Except one envelope at the bottom had handwriting on it. Curious, I pulled it out. It wasn't sealed. The handwriting was messy, rushed, my father's. It said, Eli's copy. Send if he asks. My throat tightened. So I hadn't even been on the original list. I wasn't supposed to be invited at all. A sound behind me made me freeze. I turned, and my mother was standing there, watching me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed, quietly. Eli, please don't make a scene. I wanted to laugh. A scene. As if my existence was already some kind of inconvenience. Why didn't you just tell me, I asked, that I wasn't meant to be here? Her expression softened, just a fraction. It wasn't like that. You've been so distant, Eli. We didn't know if you'd even want to come. So, you decided for me. Her silence said enough. Behind her, laughter drifted from the yard, bright, effortless, like a soundtrack to someone else's happiness. I just wanted to be included, I said quietly. That's all. My mother's eyes flicked down, then away. You always take things so personally. And that sentence, felt like a knife slipped between my ribs. I didn't reply. I just nodded once, set the invitation back down, and walked past her. Outside, the night felt colder, the music softer. Adam was giving a toast, his arm around Sophie, his voice carrying across the yard. Everyone cheered when he mentioned family. Glasses clinked. My mother wiped a tear from her eye. My father smiled. And I just stood there in the shadows, my glass empty, my hands trembling slightly. That was the moment it hit me, but truly painfully, Iswar, that I was just background to their story. A supporting role they didn't need anymore. Still, I stayed until the very end. I watched the lights dim, the guests leave, the laughter fade, and when it was finally over, when only the faint hum of the pool lights remained, I slipped out quietly without saying goodbye. The road home was long and silent. The kind of silence that doesn't end when the car stops. When I got home, I set the invitation on my counter again. It looked exactly the same as it had the first time. Perfect, impersonal, indifferent. And that night, for the first time in years, I cried. Not because they forgot me, but because I realized maybe they never really saw me in the first place. The morning after the party, I woke to the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. It wasn't peace. It was absence. Like the sound had been drained from the world overnight, leaving only the weight of thought behind. The invitation still sat on my counter, same as before, the faint gold letters catching the gray light leaking through my blinds. I made coffee, poured it into a chipped mug, and tried not to look at it. But my eyes kept drifting back. There's something strange about grief that doesn't have a body. You don't bury it. You just live with it. Wake up beside it. Pour coffee with it. Walk to work pretending it isn't there. I thought maybe after a night of sleep, the ache would fade. It didn't. If anything, it settled deeper, quieter. At noon, I opened my laptop, tried to work. I had a draft due for a magazine column I freelanced for. But the words didn't come. Every sentence I typed sounded hollow, like echoes in an empty room. My editor's voice was in my head, telling me to keep it personal, raw. I almost laughed. Personal was exactly what I didn't want anymore. By evening, I was restless. My phone buzzed a few times throughout the day, friends asking if I wanted to grab drinks, a coworker checking on deadlines, but not a single message from my family. Not even a polite, thanks for coming. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. By nightfall, I found myself scrolling through social media, something I usually avoided. And there it was, my brother's engagement post. The same photo from the invitation, now framed with captions and congratulations. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. My parents had both posted it too, each writing how proud they were, how beautiful the evening had been surrounded by family and loved ones. Family. I stared at that word until it stopped looking like a word at all. Then I noticed something. Small, tucked away in one of the photos my mother had uploaded. A wide shot of the backyard, lights glowing soft and golden, people mingling in little clusters. And there I was, blurred in the background, standing by the drink table. For a moment, I thought about commenting something, a joke maybe, but I didn't. Instead, I just closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The silence of my apartment pressed in again, thick and heavy. That's when I decided to drive back. Not to see them, not even to talk, just to see. It was late when I pulled into their street again. Most of the houses were dark now, quiet, asleep. My parents' place still had one light on, the kitchen window glowing faintly through the blinds. I parked down the street, telling myself it wasn't weird, that I just wanted to pick something up I might have left behind. But the truth was, I didn't even know what I was looking for. When I reached the porch, I hesitated. The door wasn't locked. It never was when my parents were home. I could hear faint movement inside, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation. I didn't ring the bell. I just stood there, staring at the faint light spilling through the frosted glass, the shadows moving beyond it. I could make out their voices, my mother's soft, measured tone, my father's deeper one. Then Adam's laugh, low and familiar. For a second, I imagined stepping in, sitting at the table again, pretending the invitation hadn't mattered, pretending I still belonged. But before I could move, I heard something that made me freeze. My name. Eli was here, my father was saying. A pause. Then my mother, quietly. I didn't expect him to come. You told me not to send the invite. I told you to wait, my father replied. Adam wanted to talk to him first. Adam's voice joined, soft but tense. There's nothing to talk about. He made his choice years ago. He doesn't want to be part of this family, Mom. You know that. My stomach turned cold. My mother's sigh followed. He's still your brother. A pause. Then Adam again, colder now. He's not really. Something fragile inside me cracked at that. I stepped back from the door, my breath shallow. For years, I'd told myself I was the one who left, that the distance was my choice, my fault. But hearing them speak like that, like I was a stranger, something in me shifted. The air outside felt different now, thinner. I walked away before they could see me. Back in my car, I sat for a long time, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The house stood still behind me, glowing warm and soft like a postcard. But I knew what lived inside it now, and it wasn't home. Days passed in fragments after that. I went to work, wrote what I could, tried to fill the space with noise, podcasts, the hum of the city, anything to drown out the echoes of that night. But quiet always found me again. One evening, while sorting through my old boxes, mostly drafts, half-finished stories, old notebooks, I came across something strange. A photograph I didn't remember taking. It was of me and Adam. We were kids, maybe 8 or 9, standing in front of the old house before my parents remodeled it. Both of us grinning, both holding a small wooden box between us. On the back in my handwriting, it said, "The secret box." Something about that phrase stirred a memory. Faint. Buried. The box. We'd made it together one summer, painting it with leftover blue from the shed. Inside, we'd kept little things that mattered. Notes, small trinkets, a friendship bracelet Sophie had made when she was still just Adam's friend from next door. Stupid things that meant everything when you were a kid. We'd buried it under the maple tree in the backyard. I hadn't thought about it in years. But now, looking at that photo, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea was ridiculous, childish, more, but part of me needed to know if it was still there. Maybe because it was the last thing that had ever felt like ours. So that night, I drove back again. The neighborhood was dark, still. My parents' house was mostly unlit. Just the faint glow from the upstairs windows. I parked farther this time, cut the engine, and walked the rest of the way. The gate creaked softly as I slipped into the backyard. The air was cold, the grass damp beneath my shoes. The maple tree stood tall at the far end, leaves whispering faintly in the wind. For a while, I just stood there staring at it. Then I knelt, brushing my hand over the soil where I thought we'd buried it. The ground was uneven, covered with years of roots and fallen leaves. I used my keys to dig, clumsy at first. The dirt was softer than I expected, and after a few minutes, I hit something solid. My pulse quickened. I cleared away the soil until the edge of wood appeared. The box was still there, warped, faded, but intact. Carefully, I lifted it out. It felt lighter than I remembered. I brushed off the dirt, pried it open. Inside, the air smelled of rot and time. Most of the papers had disintegrated, but a few things remained: a marble, a keychain, and a folded piece of paper wrapped in plastic. I unwrapped it gently. It was a letter, addressed to me. The handwriting wasn't mine. It wasn't Adam's either, it was my father's. For a moment, I just stared at it under the faint porch light, my breath visible in the cold air. Then, with trembling fingers, I opened it. Eli, it began. If you're reading this, then I suppose I didn't have the courage to tell you in person. My heart pounded. I hope someday you'll understand that everything we did was to protect you. Not from us, from what came before. You deserve to know the truth, but your mother and I thought it best to wait until you were ready. The words blurred slightly as I read on. You were never supposed to feel different, Eli, but you were never meant to be the same either. I stopped. The sentence didn't make sense. I kept reading. There's a reason things have always felt strained, and it's not because of who you are, it's because of where you came from. We promised her we'd keep you safe, that we'd raise you as our own. We did our best, but I know the truth has a way of surfacing. My stomach dropped. Her? Who was her? The rest of the letter trailed off. The ink smeared, the words faded. I could only make out fragments. Found at the hospital. Papers sealed. Adam doesn't know. My hands trembled as I folded it back. The night around me suddenly felt too still. I looked up toward the house, the windows dark, the wind whispering through the trees. And for the first time, I felt something deeper than hurt. I felt the shape of a question forming, sharp and terrible. If I wasn't truly part of them, if I'd been someone else's before I was theirs, then who was I? I didn't have an answer. Not that night. I took the letter and the box with me, leaving the ground open behind me like a wound. Back in my apartment, I laid everything out on the table. The faded box, the marble, the letter. The handwriting wavered under the lamplight, uneven but unmistakably real. I read it again, slower this time. Every word a little heavier. Protect you. Her. Sealed papers. I opened my laptop, searching through old files, public records, anything that could tell me something about my own name. But there was nothing. No adoption papers, no birth certificates before the age of 2. My parents had always told me I was born in a small hospital outside town, that the records had been lost when it closed. I never questioned it. Until now. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I stopped searching. My eyes burned, my head ached, but my chest felt strangely hollow, like part of me had fallen away. The invitation, the guest, the distance, it all made a kind of terrible sense now. Maybe I'd always been a guest, not just at that party, in their lives. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling again, listening to the faint hum of the city through the window. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed distantly, fading into the night. And I realized something quietly, painfully true. I'd spent years trying to belong to a story that was never mine to begin with. The next day, I didn't go to work. I couldn't. I just sat by the window, watching the sky shift from gray to pale blue, the world going on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. At some point, I picked up my phone and called my mother. She didn't answer the first time, or the second. It was late afternoon when she finally called back. Eli, she said, her voice measured. Is everything all right? No, I said. Not really. A pause, the faint rustle of movement on her end. What's wrong? I found something, I said quietly. In the backyard. Another pause, longer this time. What did you find? The box and a letter. Her silence told me everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You weren't supposed to find that. I think I was, I said. Eventually. She exhaled shakily. Your father thought it was better if you never knew. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything, I said. Does Adam know? No. Who is she? My mother didn't answer. Mom, I pressed. Who is she? There was a long, brittle silence, then softly, she was someone we loved once. Someone who couldn't stay. That was all she said before hanging up. The line went dead, leaving only the quiet hum of the dial tone. And I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, realizing that the truth, whatever it was still just out of reach. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the letter, those smeared words, the unfinished confession. Protect you. She. Sealed papers. They circled my mind like fragments of a dream that refused to fade. By dawn, I knew I wouldn't find peace until I knew who she was. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' neighborhood again. The streets looked different now. Smaller, almost artificial, like the whole place was built to hide things under its neat lawns and trimmed hedges. I didn't go to the house, not yet. Instead, I went to see someone who had lived next door to us for as long as I could remember. Mrs. Lang. She was old now, her house faded at the edges, but still smelling faintly of lavender and lemon polish. When she opened the door, her eyes widened slightly. Eli, my goodness, you haven't been by in years. I know, I said softly. Do you have a minute? She smiled. For you, always. Inside, everything was exactly the same. Same floral curtains, same glass dish of hard candies on the coffee table. It was like stepping into a preserved memory. What brings you back here? She asked, lowering herself into her armchair. I hesitated. I found something in my parents' yard, something from when I was a kid. Her eyes softened. Ah, those were good years, weren't they? You and Adam, always running around out there? Mrs. Lang, I interrupted gently. Do you remember someone who used to come by? A woman, maybe before I started school. Someone who wasn't family, but close. Her expression shifted, not surprise exactly, but something like caution. Why do you ask? She said slowly. I think she knew me, I said. Maybe even before my parents did. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached for her teacup, her hand trembling slightly. Eli, some things are better left alone. Please, I said quietly. I just need the truth. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Pity, maybe, or guilt. There was a woman, she said finally. She came by often before you were old enough to remember. Young, kind, always standing by the fence, just watching. I thought she was a family friend. But then one day she stopped coming. Your parents said she moved away. Do you remember her name? Mrs. Lang hesitated. Nora. I think her name was Nora. The name hit like a pulse. It didn't sound familiar, not exactly, but something about it felt true. Like a name my bones recognized even if my memory didn't. What happened to her? I asked. Mrs. Lang sighed. I don't know. But after she stopped visiting, your mother changed. She got quieter, more protective of you. Your father buried himself in work. I didn't ask questions. I thanked her, though the word felt small compared to the storm that had started in my chest. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees along the street swayed gently, their branches whispering against one another. Nora, a ghost name, a thread to pull. Back in my car, I searched it. Nora, the town name, the hospital I'd been told I was born in. Nothing useful. But when I added my father's name beside it, one result caught my eye. An old article from a local newspaper archive 28 years ago. Local nurse dies after car accident. Survived by infant son placed in care of family friend. My throat went dry. The article was short, no photos, no names beyond the headline and a few details. The hospital was the same one my parents always mentioned. The date matched the year I was born, and the infant. It didn't say his name, but I didn't need it to. My hands were shaking as I scrolled back up. The pieces began to click. The sealed papers, the promise, the way my mother had said, someone we loved once. Nora wasn't just someone they knew. She was my mother. And suddenly, the guest label, the distance, the cold politeness, the way they'd always seemed to treat me like something fragile and separate, all of it made sense. They hadn't seen me as theirs because deep down they knew I wasn't. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, the world outside my windshield blurring into shapes of color and motion. For years, I'd thought I was the disappointment, the outsider, the one who'd failed to fit their mold. But maybe it wasn't disappointment at all. Maybe it was guilt. They'd built a life around a secret, and every time they looked at me, they were reminded of it. When I finally started the car, the sky had darkened. The clouds hung low, pressing close, heavy with the promise of rain. I didn't know what I was going to do next, whether I'd confront them or let it go. All I knew was that something irreversible had shifted between us. As I drove past their house one last time, I saw my mother through the window, standing in the kitchen with her back to me. The same faint light glowed around her. For a fleeting second, I almost stopped, almost went inside to tell her I understood. But then I realized I didn't. Not yet. Because somewhere in that story, in their silence, in the missing records, there was still one question left unanswered. If I was Nora's son, then what had really happened to her? It rained all night, the kind of steady, unbroken rain that seems to flatten sound, to drown thought. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city, staring at the article again and again. The words blurred after a while. I thought about calling them, my parents. But what was I supposed to say? Hey, I found out my real mother died and you just adopted me? Hid it? No matter how I phrased it, there was no version that didn't feel like betrayal, either theirs or mine. At dawn, I drove back to the old neighborhood again. This time, I didn't stop on the street. I pulled into the driveway. The rain had left the concrete slick, the flower beds soggy and overgrown. It looked less perfect now, more honest. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door in her robe, her eyes widening just a little. Eli, it's early. I know, I said. My voice sounded strange to me. That's calm, too calm. I need to talk. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or resignation. Let me get your father. We sat at the kitchen table, the three of us. The room smelled like coffee and rain, and the faint chemical scent of furniture polish. I placed the letter, the one from the garden, on the table between us. Who was Nora? Silence. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her mug but didn't drink. Where did you hear that name? She asked softly. Mrs. Lang, and the newspaper. Her eyes fluttered closed. My father leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. You weren't supposed to find that. Find what? I asked. The truth? He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw him not as my father, but as a man, weary, haunted, cornered by the past. We weren't trying to deceive you, Eli. We were trying to protect you. I almost laughed. From what? He hesitated. Then quietly, from what she became. The air left the room. What do you mean? My mother spoke now, her voice barely above a whisper. Nora was your birth mother. She was a nurse. Young. Kind. Everything the papers said. But she wasn't well. She looked at me then, eyes glassy with something like regret. When you were born, she started seeing things. Hearing things. She'd call us, sometimes in the middle of the night, saying people were watching her, that someone was trying to take you. I shook my head. That doesn't mean... She disappeared for days, my father cut in. Once, she left you alone in the apartment. We found you. After that, the hospital intervened. They said she needed help. I stared at them. So you took me? She asked us to, my mother said quickly. We were friends. We'd been trying for years to have a child, and she trusted us. She wanted you to have a safe life. But she made us promise not to tell you, not until you were ready. And the accident? My father looked down. She was driving to see you. She'd been released from the hospital that morning. She lost control on the highway. Silence pressed against the walls. I wanted to believe them. I wanted that to be the full truth. Tragic, yes, but not malicious. But something in their tone, the too perfect rhythm, the way the story fit together a little too neatly, made my stomach twist. She was driving to see me? I repeated. Then why would you hide that? My mother's eyes darted away. Because we didn't want you to carry it. But you didn't bury her near here. You didn't even tell me she existed. She didn't have anyone else, my father said sharply. We did what we thought was right. The words rang false, hollow. I looked down at the letter again. Then who wrote this? They both froze. My father's face drained of color. My mother's lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Where did you find it? She whispered. In the garden. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then she reached across the table and gripped my hand, hard, almost painfully. Eli? She said, voice trembling. You need to stop digging, please. Her eyes weren't angry. They were terrified. I left without another word. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung heavy, gray and cold. I drove without thinking, the roads winding farther from town, the trees closing in around me. I didn't know where I was going until I saw the sign. Ridgeview Cemetery. The name from the article. It was quiet there, in the kind of silence that feels alive. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked through rows of old headstones, scanning each one for her name. I found it near the back, under an oak tree whose branches stretched wide like tired arms. Nora Ainsley, 1972 and 1997. She tried to love a world that wouldn't let her. I stood there for a long time, unsure what to feel. The stone was simple, weathered. There were no flowers, no signs that anyone had been here in years. Just the sound of wind in the leaves. Then, a faint rustle behind me. I turned. A woman stood near the entrance, holding an umbrella. Maybe mid-30s, maybe older. She watched me for a long moment before walking over. You're Eli, she said. Not a question. Yes, she nodded. You look like her. My heart lurched. Did you know her? I worked with her, she said. At the hospital. I hesitated. Then maybe you can tell me what really happened. The woman, her name was Claire Ulkers, looked around, then gestured to a bench beneath the tree. We sat. The air smelled like wet earth and something faintly floral. Your mother wasn't crazy, she said finally. She was scared. Of what? Claire's eyes hardened. Of your adoptive parents. The words hit like a blow. She told me Nora had started noticing things. Her medical files being altered, her medications changing without consent. She'd confided in Claire, said she thought someone was trying to take you away. Not because she was unfit, but because she'd uncovered something about the hospital. Something about illegal adoptions. I stared at her. That's impossible. Claire shook her head. Back then, it happened more than people realize. Private arrangements, hush money, new birth certificates. Nora found out she wanted to go public. And then, the crash happened. My pulse was hammering. So you're saying I'm saying the timing was too perfect. We sat there in silence for a long time. The sky had started to clear, the light catching on the wet grass like glass. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you deserve to know who you are, Claire said. And because she wasn't crazy. She loved you. Everything she did, even the mistakes, was because she wanted to keep you safe. She handed me something, an old photograph, edges bent and faded. It was my mother, Nora, younger than I'd imagined. She was holding a baby, me. Her eyes weren't sad, not yet. They were full of something pure and radiant. Thank you, I whispered. Claire stood, pulling her umbrella open again. Be careful, Eli. People don't like when ghosts start talking. That night, I sat in my apartment with the photograph beside me, staring at it like it might start speaking. The rain had stopped. Outside, the world felt washed clean. I thought about my parents, or the people I'd thought were my parents, sitting in that spotless kitchen, clutching their coffee mugs like lifelines. I thought about the life they'd built around me, the lawn, the smiles, the polite silence. And for the first time, I saw the cost of it. They'd traded truth for comfort, love for control, family for illusion. I picked up my phone. When my father answered, his voice was tired. Eli. I went to see her grave, I said. He was silent. I met someone who worked with her. She said Nora found out about the adoption, that she wanted to expose it. He exhaled slowly. Eli, people will say anything to feel important. Did you do it? I asked. My voice broke slightly. Did you take me from her? No, he said. Then quieter. Not exactly. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in my hand, the city lights flickering through the rain-streaked glass. Somewhere between love and theft, between saving and taking, my life had been rewritten. And now, all that was left was the question of what I'd do with the truth. Later that night, I drove to their house one last time. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence that hums after midnight. Lights glowed faintly through the curtains. I didn't go inside. I just stood at the edge of the yard, the same patch of ground where I'd found the letter, and buried something new there. The photograph. Not out of anger, but because some truths don't belong to the living anymore. As I stood there, I thought I saw movement in the window. A figure, pale and still, watching me. My mother, maybe, or something older than guilt. I didn't wave, I just turned and walked away, the air cold on my face, the streetlights stretching long behind me like quiet witnesses. I didn't go back to the house again after that night. Days turned into weeks, and life moved with that strange, merciless rhythm it always does. Traffic lights changing, strangers passing, emails arriving, the world pretending nothing ever happened. But I wasn't the same. Sometimes I'd wake up and think I heard her voice, Nora's, soft, like it was echoing from somewhere between sleep and memory. I'd never really known her, yet I carried her grief now like a second heartbeat. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw her outline behind mine, faint but undeniable. I tried to confront my parents again, but there was nothing left to say. When I finally went back to the house one last time, it was empty. They'd moved. No forwarding address, no note. Just a faint indentation where their car used to sit in the driveway, and the garden, freshly dug, the soil turned over. The spot where I'd buried the photograph was gone. For a while I stood there trying to feel angry, but what I felt instead was exhaustion. A deep, almost tender sadness for all of us. They'd spent their lives trying to build something beautiful on top of a wound, pretending if they smiled long enough, the pain would forget how to find them. But pain is patient. It waits beneath foundations, seeps through cracks, finds its way into the quiet moments, the pauses at dinner tables, the glances that linger too long. I got back into my car and drove until the suburbs melted into highway, the houses fading into streaks of gray and green. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe nowhere. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. Because I finally knew where I came from. Not from perfection or pride or carefully rehearsed smiles, but from a woman who tried, who fought, who loved me even as the world broke her. And maybe, in the end, that's enough. That night, I placed the letter from the garden on my desk. I read it once more before burning it. The paper curled, the words vanishing into flame. Not erasure, but release. As the smoke rose and disappeared into the night air, I whispered something I'd never said before. Thank you, Mom. The world outside was quiet again, not the silence of secrets, but the stillness that comes after truth. And for the first time, I finally felt free. Have you ever mistaken control for love or silence for peace? How much of who you are was built on stories you didn't choose? On what others decided was best for you? If the truth hurt the people who raised you, would you still chase it? And when you finally found it, would you forgive them or yourself?